Rhett Butler McCain stared at the woman stepping down from the stagecoach, his eyes catching the dark bruises wrapped around her wrist like twisted rope, the purple shadows at her throat where fingers had pressed too hard. This was not the pale, compliant wife he had ordered from the marriage agency. The morning air hung thick with dust and disappointment. He had expected salvation in white cotton and submission. Instead, Zora Williams stood before him, her dark skin catching the Montana sun, her chin lifted despite the marks of violence painted across her body. "There's been a mistake," Rhett said. The woman's eyes met his without flinching. Intelligence burned there sharp as winter stars. "Mr. McCain, I presume I'm your bride." "Like hell you are." The stagecoach driver spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "She paid her fare same as anyone. Next stop ain't for 3 days." He climbed back onto his seat, leather creaking under his weight. Rhett stepped forward. "Wait," the driver shrugged. "Can't wait on every man's disappointment. Got a schedule to keep." The coach rolled away, leaving wheel ruts in the dust and a problem Rhett couldn't solve with his rifle. He studied the woman standing in his yard, her carpetbag clutched in hands that trembled just slightly. The bruises on her arms spoke of recent violence, fresh enough to still carry yellow edges. "You can't stay here," he said. "I paid for passage. I paid for a husband." Her voice carried education, each word precisely chosen. "The contract was clear. Contract didn't mention your condition." "My condition?" Fire sparked in her eyes. "You mean my intelligence, my ability to read and write, my knowledge of veterinary medicine and bookkeeping." Rhett's jaw tightened. Those weren't the conditions he meant, and she knew it. The color of her skin made her impossible. His neighbors would never accept it. The bank would laugh at his loan application. His whole plan crumbled like dried earth. "I mean the agency made an error. You're not what I ordered." "What you ordered." She repeated the words like they tasted bitter. "I see." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and dying grass. Rhett's cattle lowed in the distance, their voices hollow with hunger. His ranch was failing, had been failing for months. The marriage was supposed to fix everything. A wife would prove stability to the bank. A wife would help with the endless work. A wife would save him from losing everything his father had built. But not this wife. "There's a hotel in town," he said. "I'll pay for a room until the next stage." How generous. She set down her bag and straightened her torn dress. "And what happens when those men return?" "What men?" "The ones who gave me these." She touched her throat where the bruises bloomed darkest. "They'll come looking. They always do." As if summoned by her words, dust rose on the horizon. 3 riders approached at a steady pace, their silhouettes dark against the morning sun. Rhett squinted, recognizing none of them. Strangers in this territory usually meant trouble. The woman's face went pale beneath her dark skin. "They found me already." "Who are they?" "Men from the agency. They don't like it when their property runs away." Property. The word sat wrong in Rhett's mouth. He had owned property once before the war changed everything. He knew the difference between owning things and owning people. His father had taught him that much, at least. The riders drew closer. Rhett could see their faces now, hard men with harder eyes. They wore guns low on their hips like they knew how to use them. The leader raised his hand in greeting, but his smile held no warmth. "Morning," the man called out. "Name's Heartwell. We're looking for a runaway. Young colored gal goes by Zora. You seen her?" Rhett's hand moved instinctively toward his rifle. Something in the man's voice made his skin crawl. These weren't lawmen or concerned citizens. They were hunters and they had come for prey. "No," Rhett said, "no women here." Hartwell's eyes swept the ranch, lingering on the house, the barn, the places a person might hide. "Funny thing. Stage driver said he dropped someone off here this morning, someone matching her description." Stage driver was mistaken. Was he now? Hartwell dismounted, his boots hitting the ground with authority. "Mind if we take a look around? Just to be sure." Rhett stepped between the man and his house. "I mind plenty. This is private property. Now see, that's where you're wrong." Hartwell pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Got a warrant here for the return of stolen property." That gal belongs to us, legal and proper. Nobody belongs to anybody. Oh, but they do. Hartwell's smile grew wider. See, this little arrangement we got, it's all legitimate. Girl signed a contract, took our money, agreed to our terms. When she breaks that contract, she becomes our problem to solve. Behind him, Rhett heard the soft whisper of fabric. The woman had moved closer to the house, perhaps hoping to slip inside unnoticed. But Hartwell heard it too. His head turned like a snake following movement. "That her?" he asked. "That's my business. Your business is about to become our business." Hartwell's hand dropped to his gun. "Step aside, rancher. We just want what's ours." Rhett's fingers tightened on his rifle. 3 against 1 weren't good odds, but he had cover and they had none. More importantly, he had something they didn't expect. A man with nothing left to lose fought differently than a man protecting profit. "You're on my land," Rhett said. "I suggest you leave. We'll leave when we get what we came for. Then I guess you'll be leaving empty-handed." The tension stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. Hartwell's eyes narrowed, calculating odds and angles. His men shifted in their saddles, hands moving toward weapons. Then, like a summer storm breaking, the moment passed. Hartwell stepped back, his smile returning. "Maybe we got bad information," he said. "Maybe that stage driver was confused, but we'll be back through this way real soon. Keep your eyes open for that runaway. There's a reward for her return." He remounted his horse with practiced ease. "Good day, rancher. Hope we don't have to meet again." The 3 men rode away, leaving dust and threats hanging in the air. Rhett watched until they disappeared over the ridge, then turned to find the woman standing in his doorway. Her face was pale but determined, her hands steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet, they'll be back." "I know. And when they come back, I might not be here to lie for you." She nodded, understanding the warning beneath his words. "Then I'll be gone before they return." "Where will you go?" "Does it matter?" She picked up her carpetbag, its weight seeming heavier now. "I've been running for months. I can run a little further." Rhett studied her face, seeing strength beneath the exhaustion. Whatever those men had done to her, they hadn't broken her spirit. She was still fighting, still hoping. Something about that stirred feelings he thought the war had killed. "Come inside," he said. "We need to talk." Inside the cabin, silence stretched between them like barbed wire. Zora stood near the door, her bag still clutched in her hands, ready to flee at the first sign of change in his mood. Rhett poured coffee from a pot that had seen better days, the liquid black as burnt earth. "Sit," he said, pushing a cup toward her. She remained standing. "I won't be here long enough to get comfortable. Those men aren't coming back today. Maybe not tomorrow either. They'll watch from a distance first, make sure I was telling the truth." The coffee steamed between them, bitter and strong. Zora's fingers traced the rim of the cup, but she didn't drink. Her eyes swept the cabin, taking in the sparse furniture, the unmade bed, the stack of papers scattered across a rough wooden table. "You're in debt," she said. "What makes you say that?" "The bank notices. 3 of them marked urgent." She nodded toward the papers. "Also the way you look at everything in this room, a man counting what he might lose." Rhett's jaw tightened. "That's not your concern, isn't it? You needed a wife to convince the bank you were stable. Now you have one who makes you less stable than before." The truth sat heavy in the air between them. Outside, wind rattled the windows, carrying the sound of cattle lowing in distress. Rhett's head snapped toward the door. Something's wrong with the herd. He grabbed his hat and coat, then paused at the threshold. "Stay inside, don't show yourself at the windows. I'm coming with you. Like hell you are. I know animals. I can help. You know animals." His voice carried doubt thick as molasses. "My father was a veterinarian in Philadelphia. He taught me before he died." Rhett studied her face, looking for deception. Finding none, he stepped aside. "Keep your head down. If anyone comes, you run." They walked to the pasture where his cattle clustered near the water trough. Even from a distance, Rhett could see something was wrong. The animals moved sluggishly, their heads hanging low. Several lay on their sides, breathing hard. "When did this start?" Zora asked. 2 days ago. Lost 3 head already." She approached the nearest cow, her movements calm and confident. The animal didn't shy away as she ran her hands along its neck, checking its eyes, examining its mouth. Her touch was gentle but sure, practiced. "Milk fever," she said. "Common in cattle that calve too close together. You need calcium powder mixed in their feed and they need fresh water. This trough is stagnant. I don't have calcium powder." "Then you'll lose more cattle." She straightened, wiping her hands on her skirt. "How many can you afford to lose?" The answer was none. Rhett had barely enough cattle to keep the ranch running as it was. 3 more deaths would put him under. 5 would mean selling the land to pay his debts. "There's a supply store in town. They might have what we need. You can't leave me here alone, not with those men watching." "Then what do you suggest?" Zora walked to the next cow, her steps sure despite the uneven ground. "I can make calcium solution from eggshells and vinegar. It's not ideal, but it will work until you can get proper supplies." Eggshells. The acid in vinegar breaks down the shell, releasing calcium. Basic chemistry. She spoke with the confidence of someone who had done this before. Rhett found himself believing her, despite everything his experience told him about trusting strangers. They spent the afternoon treating the cattle. Zora worked with quiet efficiency, mixing her makeshift medicine while Rhett cleaned the water trough and moved the animals to fresh grass. She never complained about the heat, or the smell, or the way his bull eyed her with suspicion. As the sun began to set, painting the sky the color of old blood, they returned to the cabin. Rhett's hands were stained with dirt and medicine. Zora's dress was torn in 2 more places, but her posture remained straight. "Your books," she said, nodding toward the papers on his table. "What about them?" "They're a mess. No wonder the bank won't extend your loan." "I'm not a bookkeeper." "No, but I am." She moved to the table without invitation, her fingers sorting through the scattered papers. Bills, receipts, notes written in Rhett's rough hand. She organized them into neat piles, her movements quick and precise. "You're actually making more money than you think," she said, "but you're not tracking it properly. The bank sees chaos and assumes failure. And you can fix that. I can make it look like you know what you're doing." For the first time since the stagecoach arrived, Rhett felt something other than dread. Hope was dangerous in his position, but it crept in anyway, stubborn as weeds. "Why would you help me?" "Because helping you helps me. If this ranch fails, I have nowhere to go. And if those men come back, then we deal with that when it happens." She had turned back to his papers, her pen moving across the pages in neat, precise lines. The lamplight caught the planes of her face, softening the worry lines around her eyes. For a moment, she looked less like a problem and more like a solution. "Where did you learn all this?" he asked. "Books, schools. A father who believed daughters should be educated." Her pen never stopped moving. "A world that didn't care what I learned because they never planned to let me use it. But you're using it now." For the first time in months, yes. Something had shifted between them, subtle as the change from day to night. The tension was still there, but it had transformed from hostility to something else. Uncertainty, perhaps, or possibility. "I'll sleep in the barn," Rhett said. "You'll sleep in your own bed. I'll take the chair." "That's not right. Nothing about this situation is right, but it's what we have." She was correct, as she seemed to be about most things. This arrangement was temporary, born of necessity and desperation. But as he watched her work, transforming his chaotic records into something that made sense, he found himself wondering what it would be like if it weren't temporary. The thought was dangerous. More dangerous than the men who hunted her or the bank that threatened his land. Because it meant considering a future he had never imagined, with a woman who challenged everything he thought he knew about the world. Outside, coyotes called to each other across the empty plains. Inside, the scratch of Zora's pen against paper was the only sound. She worked by lamplight, her concentration absolute, transforming his failure into something that might be salvation. By morning, she had finished. The papers lay in neat stacks, labeled and organized. His accounts balanced for the first time in months. The numbers told a story of struggle, but also of potential. "Show this to the bank," she said. "It might buy you time. And if it doesn't, Then at least you'll know exactly how much you've lost. He studied the papers, seeing his ranch's heartbeat laid out in careful columns. She had found money he didn't know he had, expenses he could cut, income he could increase. It was like seeing his life through clearer eyes. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me yet. This is just numbers on paper. The real work starts now." She was right about that too, but for the first time in months, the real work felt possible. The cattle were already moving more easily, their heads lifting toward the morning sun. His books told a story of hope instead of despair. And the woman who had arrived as his greatest problem might be his greatest asset. The realization settled over him like dust after a storm, changing everything. The morning of the sixth day, Rhett rode to town with Zora's carefully organized papers tucked in his saddlebag. The cattle moved easier now, their heads lifted toward fresh grass. Her medicine had worked. Her bookkeeping had given him hope. For the first time in months, he felt something other than the weight of impending failure. Main Street bustled with its usual collection of ranchers, shopkeepers, and drifters. But today, conversation stopped when he passed. Eyes followed his movement with curious intensity. Word traveled fast in small towns, and his confrontation with the three strangers had not gone unnoticed. At the general store, old Henrik counted out supplies with deliberate slowness. "Heard you had visitors yesterday. News travels. Bad news travels faster." Henrik's weathered hand stacked flour sacks with practiced efficiency. "Those men came through town asking questions. Offered money for information about a runaway." "What kind of information?" "The kind that gets people hurt." Rhett's jaw tightened. "Anyone take their money? Some might have. Hard times make people do things they wouldn't normally consider." The warning was clear. Trust had become a luxury he couldn't afford. Rhett paid for his supplies and moved toward the door, but Henrik's voice stopped him. "Rhett, whatever you're mixed up in, be careful. Those men didn't look like the type to give up easy." Outside, the familiar street felt different. Hostile. Every face could belong to someone who had taken Hartwell's money. Every shadow could hide an enemy. The paranoia ate at him as he loaded his wagon and prepared for the ride home. At the telegraph office, he stopped to send a wire to his brother in Denver. If things went bad, he needed someone to know what happened. The clerk, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, read the message with obvious curiosity. "Expecting trouble?" the clerk asked. "Just keeping in touch with family. Family's important, especially when you're facing difficulties alone." The emphasis on "alone" felt deliberate. Rhett folded the receipt and left without another word. The clerk watched him go, then reached for his own telegraph key. The ride home stretched longer than usual. Every ridge could hide watchers. Every sound could signal approach. The horses sensed his tension, their ears forward, nostrils flaring at scents he couldn't detect. When his ranch came into view, relief flooded through him. The cabin stood undisturbed, smoke rising from the chimney. Zora had kept the fire burning, maintained the illusion of normalcy. But as he drew closer, he noticed her standing at the window, her posture rigid with alert attention. She met him at the door before he could dismount. "3 riders came by an hour ago, different men. They didn't stop, just rode past slow, looking everything over." How different, younger, nervous. The kind of men who take orders instead of giving them. Scouts. "That's what I thought too." She helped him unload supplies, her movements efficient despite the underlying tension. The domesticity of the task felt strange, almost normal, but normal was an illusion they couldn't afford. "I need to ask you something," Rhett said. "Ask." "Those men yesterday, Hartwell, he said you signed a contract, took their money. That true?" Her hands stilled on the flour sack she was carrying. "Yes." "What kind of contract?" "The kind that seemed legitimate until I tried to leave." "Tell me." She set down the flour and leaned against the wagon, her eyes focused on the distant mountains. "I was teaching school in Philadelphia. Good position, decent pay, but the school board decided they needed someone more suitable, someone who looked the part. They dismissed you." "They dismissed me." Word spread. "No other schools would hire me. I had debts, no prospects. Then I saw an advertisement in the paper. Teachers wanted for frontier schools. Good pay, housing provided. All I had to do was sign a contract and pay for transportation. And you believed it. I wanted to believe it. I needed to believe it. Her voice carried the weight of desperate choices. When I arrived in Denver, there was no school, no teaching position, just a building full of women who had answered similar advertisements. We learned the truth quickly enough. What truth? That we weren't teachers or seamstresses or any of the things they had promised. We were merchandise, sold to men who wanted wives but couldn't find them through normal means. The words hit him like physical blows. He had suspected something dark, but this was worse than he had imagined. How many women? Dozens. They came from all over, drawn by promises of honest work and decent futures. Instead, they found themselves trapped in contracts they couldn't break, shipped to men who saw them as property. And you escaped. I tried to escape. The first time they brought me back. The second time they beat me as an example to the others. The third time they decided I was too much trouble for the regular customers. So they sent you to me. They sent me to a man who specifically requested a white wife. They thought the humiliation would break me, make me grateful for whatever scraps of kindness I could find. Rhett absorbed this information, understanding finally clicking into place. You were punishment for both of us. I was supposed to be your disappointment and my degradation. They expected you to send me back, and they expected me to be grateful when you did. But you stayed. I stayed because I had nowhere else to go. And because for the first time in months, someone treated me like I had value. The admission hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Rhett found himself looking at her with new eyes, seeing not the problem that had stepped off the stagecoach, but the person who had refused to be broken despite everything that had been done to her. How many others are still there? He asked. I don't know. They move the women around, keep them separated. Some go to ranchers, some to mining camps, some to places I don't want to think about. And the law sees contracts and willing participants. The women signed papers, took money. In the eyes of the law, they're bound by their agreements. Even if those agreements were based on lies, especially then, the law doesn't care about the promises that were broken, only the ones that were made. Rhett stared at the mountains, their peaks sharp against the darkening sky. Justice was supposed to be blind, but in practice, it was often deaf and dumb as well. The strong preyed on the weak, and the weak had no recourse but to endure or run. There's something else, Zora said. The man who runs the operation. Hartwell, he's not just some opportunist, he's connected. Has friends in banks, in government, in law enforcement. That's how he operates so openly. Connected how? Money, influence. The kind of power that comes from having information on people who matter. Blackmail. Among other things, he doesn't just traffic women. He gathers secrets, trades favors, builds networks of obligation and debt. The marriage contracts are just one part of a larger enterprise. The scope of it staggered him. This wasn't just about one woman fleeing abuse. It was about corruption that reached into every level of society, a web of exploitation that fed on desperation and protected itself through influence. No wonder they want you back, he said. I know things, names, places, methods. I kept my eyes open, memorized details. I thought someday I might find someone who would listen. And now I'm not sure it matters. Hartwell has resources I can't match. He can buy witnesses, silence opposition, make problems disappear. He can try. You can't fight him alone. I'm not alone. The words surprised him as much as they surprised her. When had he started thinking of them as partners rather than strangers thrown together by circumstance? When had her fight become his fight? Those men will be back, she said. Let them come. You don't understand what you're facing. I understand enough. I understand that some things are worth fighting for even when the odds are bad. And if we lose, then we lose together. The sun was setting, painting the sky the color of old copper. In the distance, cattle moved across the range, their shapes dark against the fading light. This was his land, his life, his choice to make. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Hartwell would return with more men, more pressure, more threats. The bank would demand answers. The neighbors would ask questions. The law would look the other way. But tonight he had a choice to make. He could send Zora away, protect himself, preserve what remained of his old life. Or he could stand with her, face the storm together, and see what remained when the dust settled. The choice had already been made. Perhaps it had been made the moment he lied to Hartwell's men. Perhaps it had been made when he saw the intelligence in her eyes, the strength in her bearing, the refusal to be broken despite everything she had endured. She was looking at him now, waiting for his decision. The last light of day caught the planes of her face, showed him the woman who had saved his cattle, organized his books, and trusted him with her story. "We'll need more supplies," he said. "For what? For the fight that's coming." The days blurred together in careful preparation. Rhett reinforced the cabin's windows, checked his ammunition, mapped escape routes through the canyon behind his property. Zora worked beside him, her movements precise and purposeful. She had survived months of captivity by being observant, adaptive, ready. They spoke little during the work. Words felt dangerous now, weighted with implications neither was ready to voice. But their silence carried its own language. The way she handed him nails before he asked. The way he positioned himself between her and the open door. Small gestures that spoke of trust building in the spaces between fear. On the 9th day, young Arya Stark arrived on horseback, her face flushed with excitement and worry. The girl was barely 15, all sharp angles and restless energy, but she rode better than most men and feared nothing that walked or crawled. "Papa sent me to warn you," she said, dismounting with practiced ease. "Strange men been asking questions in town, offering money for information about your business." "What kind of questions?" "About your wife, about when she came, where she's from, what she looks like." Rhett's jaw tightened. "Anyone taking their money?" "Some. The Hendersons need cash for their sick boy. Old Pete at the saloon never could resist easy money." "How much time do we have?" "Not much. They were heading this way when I left town." Zora stepped forward, her face calm despite the news. "Arya, can you ride to the territorial marshal's office in Billings? That's 2 days hard riding. Can you do it?" "I can do anything on horseback." "Then carry a message. Tell Marshal Hayes that the Hartwell trafficking operation is operating in this territory. Tell him Zora Williams has evidence and testimony." Arya's eyes widened. "Trafficking? They steal women, Arya. Sell them to men who treat them as property. The Marshal needs to know." "What if he doesn't believe me?" "He'll believe you. You're Henrik's daughter and your word carries weight." The girl straightened in her saddle, accepting the responsibility. "I'll ride fast. Stay off the main roads. If those men see you, they'll know you're carrying messages. I know the back trails better than anyone." She wheeled her horse around, then paused. "Mrs. McCain, you be careful. These men don't look like the kind who give up easy." Mrs. McCain. The title sat strangely, a fiction that had begun to feel real. Zora nodded gravely. "I'll be careful." Arya spurred her horse into a gallop, disappearing into the maze of canyons and ridges that she knew better than her own backyard. The dust from her passage hung in the air, then settled, leaving only silence and the weight of approaching danger. 2 days, Rhett said, maybe more before help arrives. If help arrives at all. You don't trust the Marshal. I don't trust anyone I haven't met. Too many people have disappointed me. They returned to their preparations, but the urgency had intensified. Time was running out, and they both knew it. The next confrontation would be different from the first. Hartwell would come prepared for resistance. That evening, as lamplight flickered against the cabin walls, Zora sat at the table working on something she wouldn't let him see. Her pen moved across paper in quick, confident strokes, filling page after page with careful script. "What are you writing?" he asked. "Names, places, everything I remember about Hartwell's operation. For the Marshal, for whoever survives to tell the story." The words chilled him. She was preparing for the possibility that neither of them would see the end of this, making sure that even in death, she could strike back at the men who had stolen her freedom. "We're going to survive this," he said. "Are we?" "Yes. How can you be sure?" "Because I won't let them take you." She looked up from her writing, studying his face in the lamplight. Why? Why what? Why risk everything for someone you barely know? The question hung between them, demanding honesty he wasn't sure he could give. How could he explain that she had become essential to him? That her presence had awakened something he thought the war had killed? That the thought of losing her now felt worse than the thought of losing his ranch? Because it's the right thing to do, he said finally. Men don't usually die for the right thing. Some do. You're not some men. What am I then? She set down her pen, her eyes never leaving his face. You're a man who sees me as human. That's rarer than you might think. The admission revealed more than she had intended. He saw the moment she realized it, the way her defenses tried to rebuild themselves. But it was too late. The truth was out, hanging in the air between them. Zora, don't what? Don't make this about feelings. Don't make it about something it can't be. What can it be? Real, lasting. Anything more than two desperate people helping each other survive. But even as she spoke the words, her eyes said something different. They spoke of hope carefully guarded, of affection reluctantly acknowledged, of the possibility that survival might lead to something more. Maybe that's enough, he said. Maybe it is. They sat in silence, the weight of unspoken words settling around them. Outside, wind moved through the grass, carrying the scent of rain and the promise of change. The storm was coming in more ways than one. On the 10th day, the sky turned the color of old brass, heavy with unshed rain. The air pressure dropped, making the horses restless and the cattle nervous. Weather was building, the kind of storm that turned creeks into rivers and washed out roads. They'll come today, Zora said, standing at the window, before the rain starts. How do you know? Because they don't want to be caught in the open when the storm hits. They'll want this finished. She was right. By midday, dust appeared on the horizon, moving steadily toward the ranch. 5 riders this time, more than before. Hartwell was taking no chances. Remember the plan, Rhett said, checking his rifle. Get to the canyon if things go bad. Only if things go bad. Things are already bad. She was right about that too. They had passed the point of peaceful resolution days ago. Now there was only the question of who would be left standing when the dust settled. The riders approached with deliberate slowness, taking time to study the ranch, looking for signs of ambush or additional defenders. Hartwell rode in the center, his face set in hard lines. The men flanking him carried rifles across their saddles, ready for immediate use. They stopped 50 yards from the cabin, close enough to talk, far enough to avoid surprise. Hartwell dismounted with theatrical casualness, his movements designed to project confidence and control. "McCain," he called out, "time to stop playing games." Rhett stepped onto the porch, his rifle held loosely but ready. "No games here. We know she's in there. We know you've been harboring her. Return what belongs to us and we'll forget this unfortunate misunderstanding. Nothing here belongs to you. Everything here belongs to someone. The question is who has the stronger claim." Thunder rumbled in the distance, a low warning of the storm approaching. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and the promise of violence. Time was running out for everyone. "Last chance, McCain, send her out or we'll come in and get her." "You're welcome to try." Hartwell's smile was cold as winter stone. "I was hoping you'd say that." He raised his hand and his men began to spread out, surrounding the cabin. The final confrontation was beginning, and there would be no turning back. Inside the cabin, Zora finished her writing and folded the papers carefully. Whatever happened next, the truth would survive. Someone would know what had been done, and to whom and why. The storm was coming and they would meet it together. The standoff stretched taut as bowstring, 5 men surrounding the cabin while thunder gathered overhead. Rhett held his position on the porch, rifle ready, watching Hartwell's men position themselves for assault. The air tasted of copper and coming rain. Then hoofbeats approached from the east. A lone rider in a fine suit, mounted on a horse worth more than most men's annual wages. The newcomer's presence shifted the dynamic immediately. Hartwell's men turned toward the sound, their formation breaking. "Mr. McCain," the rider called out, dismounting with practiced authority. I'm Smog, president of First National Bank. I believe we need to discuss your loan situation. The timing was no coincidence. Rhett studied the banker's face, seeing calculation behind the polite smile. This isn't a good time for business. On the contrary, this is the perfect time. Smog approached with the confidence of a man who held all the cards. You see, I've been having interesting conversations with Mr. Hartwell here about your circumstances. What kind of conversations? The kind that determine whether you keep this ranch or lose everything you've worked for. Zara appeared in the doorway, her face pale but determined. Smog's eyes fixed on her with disturbing intensity like a hunter studying prey. Ah, the source of all this trouble, he said. Miss Williams, I presume. Mrs. McCain, she replied, lifting her chin. Of course. How convenient. Smog's smile held no warmth. Mr. McCain, I have a proposition that will solve everyone's problems. I'm listening. Your loan comes due in 3 days. You lack the collateral to secure an extension. However, I'm prepared to offer you a deal. What kind of deal? Return this woman to Mr. Hartwell's custody, and your debt will be forgiven. Your ranch will remain yours, free and clear. The words hit like physical blows. Rhett felt the ground shift beneath his feet, understanding finally clicking into place. Your partners, business associates, Mr. Hartwell provides certain services. I provide financial backing and legal protection. What services? Human resource management. There's a considerable demand for domestic workers in the territory. Mr. Hartwell simply matches supply with demand. You mean slavery? I mean legal contracts, properly executed and duly witnessed. The women sign willingly, accepting financial compensation for their services. Under false pretenses. Under whatever pretenses prove necessary. The law doesn't concern itself with the details of recruitment, only with the validity of the contracts. Zora stepped forward, her voice steady despite the circumstances. And if those contracts are challenged? They never are. You see, I ensure that the proper officials understand their interests. Judges, marshals, territorial administrators. They all depend on the bank's goodwill for their prosperity. Corruption. Pragmatism. The frontier requires practical solutions to practical problems. Lonely men need wives. Desperate women need security. I simply facilitate mutually beneficial arrangements. By force. By necessity. Some people require persuasion to see where their best interests lie. Thunder cracked overhead, closer now. The first drops of rain began to fall, dark spots on the dusty ground. The storm was breaking, and with it, the careful balance of power. So here's my offer, Smog continued. Give me the woman and keep your ranch. Or keep the woman and lose everything, your choice. That's no choice at all. It's the only choice you have. I control your debt, your land, your future. Cross me and you'll have nothing. Rhett looked at Zora, seeing the resignation in her eyes. She had expected this moment, prepared for it. Her fingers touched the papers in her pocket, the testimony she had written in case she didn't survive. I need time to consider, he said. Time is a luxury you can't afford. Decide now. The rain began in earnest, heavy drops that struck the earth with violent intensity. The storm had arrived, bringing with it the moment of truth. Rhett felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him, heavier than the approaching thunder. Rhett, Zora said quietly, take the deal. No, you'll lose everything. I'll lose everything that matters if I give you up. This ranch is your life. No, it's just land, your life. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Smog watched with amusement, enjoying the drama of their desperation. How touching, he said, but sentiment doesn't pay debts or secure futures. What's your answer, McCain? My answer is no. Then you're a fool. Maybe. But I'm a fool who can live with himself. Smog's expression hardened. Very well, you've made your choice. Mr. Hartwell, the woman is yours, take her. Hartwell's men began to move, closing the circle around the cabin. Rain fell harder now, turning dust to mud, making footing treacherous. Rhett raised his rifle, knowing the odds were impossible but refusing to surrender. Wait, Zora called out. I'll go. No, Rhett said. I won't let you lose everything for me. It's not your decision to make, isn't it? She stepped past him, moving toward Hartwell's men. My freedom, my choice. Zara, don't do this. I have to. You saved me once. Let me save you now. She walked into the rain, her steps steady despite the fear in her eyes. Hartwell's men moved to flank her, ensuring she couldn't escape. The banker watched with satisfaction, his investment secured. But Zora had one more card to play. As she reached Hartwell's horse, she pulled the folded papers from her pocket. Before I go, she said, holding the documents high, I want everyone to know what's written here. Names, places, dates, everything about your operation, Mr. Hartwell, everyone you've hurt, everyone you've corrupted, everyone who's helped you. Give me those papers. No, these are my insurance. Hurt me and copies go to every newspaper from here to Washington. The territorial governor, the federal marshals, the army, everyone will know what you've done. Hartwell's face went white. You're bluffing. Am I? Ask Mr. Smog about the account I opened in his bank. Ask him about the safety deposit box I rented, the instructions I left with his clerk. The banker's expression shifted, uncertainty replacing confidence. What instructions? If I don't return to collect those papers within 30 days, they're to be sent to a list of recipients. Journalists, politicians, law enforcement, people who can't be bought or intimidated. You're lying. Test me. The rain poured down harder, washing away the dust and revealing the solid ground beneath. Zora stood in the storm, defiant and unbroken, holding the weapon that could destroy them all. So here's my counteroffer, she said. Leave us alone and those papers stay locked away. Continue this persecution and the truth comes out. Your choice, gentlemen. Smog and Hartwell exchanged glances, calculating odds and risks. The woman they had dismissed as property had just demonstrated that she was something far more dangerous. She was a witness with evidence, and she was prepared to use it. This isn't over, Hartwell said finally. Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet. The men mounted their horses, defeated but not destroyed. They would be back, but not today. Not while the storm raged and the truth waited in a safety deposit box. As they rode away, Zora collapsed to her knees in the mud, the strength finally leaving her. Rhett rushed to her side, pulling her against him as rain soaked them both. Is it true? He asked. About the papers. Some of it. I did write testimony. I did leave papers with the bank clerk. And the rest? The rest was hope and desperation and the kind of bluff that only works once. But it worked. For now. They stood together in the rain, holding each other as the storm washed the world clean around them. The immediate danger had passed, but the future remained uncertain. The enemy was wounded but not defeated, and they would have to remain vigilant. But for this moment in the heart of the storm, they were alive and together and free. The storm passed, leaving the world washed clean and gleaming. 3 days crawled by without sign of Hartwell or his men. Rhett worked the ranch with nervous energy, checking fences, tending cattle, watching the horizon. Zora moved through the cabin with quiet efficiency, cooking, cleaning, waiting. On the 4th morning, riders appeared from the east. Not Hartwell's men, but a different group entirely. United States Marshal Hayes rode at the front, his badge catching the morning sun. Behind him came 6 deputies, armed and ready. Mr. McCain, Hayes called out, dismounting with official authority. I understand you've been having some difficulties. You could say that. Miss Stark delivered an interesting message, claims you have information about a trafficking operation. I do. Hayes studied the cabin, the grounds, the defensive preparations that were still visible. Where's the woman, the one with the testimony? Zora emerged from the cabin, her posture straight despite the fear in her eyes. I'm here, Marshal. You're Zora Williams. I am. I need to hear your story. All of it. They gathered in the cabin as she spoke, her voice steady and clear. She named names, described places, detailed the operation that had trapped dozens of women. Hayes listened without interruption, his deputies taking notes. You have proof of these allegations? He asked when she finished. I have testimony, I have documents, I have witnesses who can corroborate my story. Where are these witnesses? Some are dead, some are too afraid to speak. Some are still trapped in the system. That's not much to build a case on. It's enough to start an investigation. Hayes was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. This is dangerous territory, Miss Williams. The men you're accusing have influence connections. They won't go down easy. I know. Are you prepared for what comes next? The legal battles, the threats, the attempts to discredit you. I've been preparing for this moment since I escaped. I won't back down now. And you, McCain, you understand you're making yourself a target by harboring her. I understand. Why risk it? Rhett looked at Zora, seeing the strength that had carried her through months of captivity, the intelligence that had saved his ranch, the courage that had faced down armed men. Because it's the right thing to do. The right thing doesn't always lead to the right outcome. Sometimes it's the only thing that matters. Hayes nodded slowly. I'll need those documents. All of them. Zora produced the papers she had hidden, the testimony she had written by lamplight, the evidence she had gathered piece by piece. Hayes read through them carefully, his expression growing darker with each page. This is extensive, he said finally, detailed. If even half of this is true, we're looking at a conspiracy that reaches into multiple territories. It's all true. Then we have work to do. The next hours passed in careful planning. Hayes would take Zora's testimony to the territorial capital, begin formal proceedings against Hartwell and his associates. Federal marshals would investigate the trafficking ring, track down other victims, build a case strong enough to withstand legal challenges. What about Smog? Red asked. The banker, he'll be harder to touch. Men like him are careful, leave few traces, but if we can break the trafficking ring, we might find evidence of his involvement. And until then, you watch your backs. These men won't give up easily. As the sun reached its zenith, Hayes prepared to leave. His deputies would remain, establishing a protective presence around the ranch. The immediate danger was over, but the larger battle was just beginning. Miss Williams, Hayes said, mounting his horse, you've done a brave thing. Not many would have risked so much to help others. I had help. Yes, you did, McCain. You've got yourself a remarkable woman here. Don't let her go. I don't intend to. Hayes rode away, carrying with him the testimony that would either bring justice or doom them all. The deputies spread out, taking positions around the ranch. For the first time in days, Rhett felt something approaching peace. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, he found Zora standing by the corral, watching the horses graze. She looked different now, lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Regrets? He asked. About what? Speaking out, taking the risk. No regrets, only hope. Hope for what? That other women won't have to endure what I did. That men like Hartwell will face consequences for their actions. And hope for us. She turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the dying light. What is us, Rhett? I don't know, something new. Something worth fighting for. Even if it's difficult, even if people disapprove, especially then, the world won't make it easy. The world rarely makes anything easy, but we've already faced the worst it could throw at us. Everything else is just details. She smiled then, the first genuine smile he had seen from her. It transformed her face, revealing the woman she had been before captivity, before fear, before the long struggle for survival. I love you, she said. I love you too. The words hung in the air between them, simple and profound. They had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. Whatever came next, they would face it together. 6 months later, the trials began. Hartwell and 3 of his associates were convicted of trafficking, sentenced to long prison terms. Smog escaped prosecution but lost his bank, his reputation, his carefully constructed empire. The trafficking ring was dismantled, its victims freed or compensated. Zora's testimony became the foundation for new laws protecting women from exploitation. Her courage inspired others to speak out, to demand justice, to refuse victimhood. The change was slow, imperfect, but real. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Rhett's cattle grew fat on good grass, his books showed steady profit. Zora established a school for local children, teaching them to read and write and think for themselves. The community slowly accepted them. recognizing their worth despite their differences. On a morning bright with promise, they stood together on the porch where she had first arrived. The bruises had long since faded, replaced by the quiet strength of a woman who had survived and thrived. The fear was gone, replaced by hope and purpose and love. "No regrets?" he asked, echoing their conversation from months before. "None. Only gratitude." "For what?" "For the moment you chose to see me as human, for the courage to stand when others would have run, for the love that grew from respect. And for the future we'll build together. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one victory at a time." The sun rose higher, painting the world in shades of gold and possibility. They had traveled far from that first moment of confrontation and confusion. The journey had been difficult, dangerous, marked by loss and struggle. But it had led them here to this moment, to this choice, to this love. The future stretched before them, uncertain but no longer fearful. They had each other, they had their convictions, they had the strength that comes from surviving the worst and choosing the best. It was enough. It was everything. The morning wind carried the scent of sage and new grass, the sound of cattle lowing in contentment, the promise of rain that would bring growth instead of storm. They stood together in the light, two people who had found in each other the courage to face whatever might come. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.